Hey folks, Malforian here, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be taking a look at the Dev Diary 3 countries for Grey Eminence, the recently announced grand strategy game. We're just going to go through there. It's all about government reforms, religion, slavery, some other things, everything to do with your realm and kind of how it operates during the time span of the game, which again is 600 years. That's a pretty big time span, so it'll be interesting to see how these mechanics do actually interact with each other as we progress through the timeline. Speaking to the devs of the game, it looks like these are going to be every 2 weeks or so, the dev diaries. So there's been a little bit of a spam of them this week just because we were catching up with the already released versions. But going forwards, probably about every 2 weeks, we'll have a discussion on the latest dev diary. And yeah, if you're interested in the game or you just enjoy the channel, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, all that good YouTube stuff. It helps other people find the channel and just lets me know if you're interested in the game and me covering these dev diaries. So yeah, with that being that, we're just going to get into it. So hello and welcome to Grey Eminence's third development diary. Like I said, this is all about countries. The 600-year span between 1356 and 1956 saw the rise and fall of staggering variety of states. I mean, there's so many over that time frame. I think a lot of games struggle with like a 300-year time span. How these are going to work is going to be very interesting to watch. The kingdoms and empires of 1356 are composite states with multi-levels of vassals, each of which is a playable country in its own right. The exact interactions between subject countries and their overlords will be subject to a separate dev diary. So again, seeing how the mechanics of being a vassal to somebody else works rather than being your own overlord. We thought it was a good idea to clear this up. Good thing to say. I'm sure people would have been like, oh, can you play as a vassal? Do you always have to be the top tier person in a realm? So yeah, it's going to have all that vassal mechanics and all that kind of good stuff in there as well. For now, we'll describe the inner workings of a country in Grey Eminence in order to properly represent the diversity of states across the centuries, the 6th century time frame. We've made countries as customizable as possible through several interlock systems. So again, if you've watched or you've read the previous dev diaries, they are trying to make everything as customizable as they can in the game, so you can kind of play the game how you want, but also that historical tint to it as well. All good stuff. So government forms at the highest level, we define a country by its government. Grey Eminence has 32 different government forms. That's a lot. Defined by 2 related parameters: source of legitimacy and distribution of power. So the source of legitimacy, as this says, it's pretty self-explanatory. Were you, like historically, did you say like God put you on the throne, or if you were in a republic, votes put you in charge, or like it says here as well, tribal, you were just like the head tribal person, or religious, you're the pope or whatever. Gonna have those 4 different pillars. Country with dynastic source of legitimacy are monarchies. They're the most common government in 1356. So, if you've played Crusader Kings, you know all about this. Your ruling dynasty members, different kind of marriages and stuff like that. The religious source of legitimacy is tied quite closely to religion, pretty obviously. The various religious denominations in Grey Eminence have unique mechanics, which we'll describe in another dev diary. So that's good. It sounds like all the different religions are going to have their own separate mechanics. I mean, pretty obviously, if you're Catholic, you can have different mechanics to, if you're Islamic or, like a Satru or something like that, like a tribal faith. The source of legitimacy dictates the country's ruler must be a member of the clergy. So yeah, that sounds more like, if you're the Pope. Rulers of countries with a electoral source of legitimacy derive their authority solely from the outcome of elections, which can take various forms. Note these elections needn't be public. In fact, the vast majority of elections were restricted to a few elites, both in candidacy and participation. So I think this might be talking about the HRE, especially later on, but those kind of they were elections, but they weren't elections like how we would speak about in modern times. So it was like 12 people chose who was going to be the emperor of the HRE. So I think it's talking more along those lines, especially at the beginning, but it sounds like as time progresses, you'll get realistic democracies, especially if we're going through to 1956. So yeah, we'll definitely get those kind of full well, maybe not full elective governments, but that kind of thing. The final source of legitimacy is tribal. It reflects social structures where kinship and belonging to a particular culture were prioritized higher than dynastic ties. Nevertheless, we're departing from other grand strategy games by not artificially handcapping tribal countries simply due to them being tribal. Now that is interesting. If you've played Paradox games, mainly, that's always the one that comes to mind because it's the nearest kind of game to this. If you play tribal, you're pretty much always handicapped You usually have other benefits. You usually have like more troops. It's easier to get troops. It might be easier to expand without, you know, having to go through like legal forms of expansion. But you do usually get punished for, you know, less tech, less better, you know, worse buildings. You know, it's that kind of like rock paper scissors kind of formula. So yeah, they're not going to do that with this. So I wonder how they're gonna make it play differently from feudal realm, because obviously you want that kind of difference. You don't want everything to feel the same. So again, it'd be kind of interesting to see how they do that. The second determinant of government is distribution of power. This perimeter tells us who a country's power holder should be. I say should because the reality of a country's power distribution may diverge significantly from the law says it should be. The options are autocratic, oligarchic, or democratic, which again, they kind of cover everything. We'll quickly go through the different types here, and then they've got a really good breakdown here of how they work across the three systems. Under autocratic power distribution, the country's ruler is the sole legal authority. Of course, the elites and population may still wield significant de facto power, but their ability to exercise it through legal means is limited. So yeah, that's pretty obvious how that works. The oligarchy power distribution of power is more common in 1356. It grants one of the country's elites enough de jure power to act as the counterweight to the ruler. It's usually manifested in assembly, council, or parliament. So again, you know, if you're you maybe got the king, but then you have a parliament, which basically kind of technically runs the country, but there is the king there as well. The final distribution is democratic. It involves granting de jure political power to the population through a link to the rise of constitutionalism and political parties. However, while enfranchising the people might appease their hunger for representation, one can never satisfy everyone. Thus, once representative cat is out of the bag, you'll find you basically can't undo it. You know, you can't be like, oh, I'm going to be representative realm, and then be like, actually, can we go back to absolute monarchy? They're going to be like, no. And they even say, I lied when I said there are only 3 distributions of power. We actually have a 4th, anarchic. This one alters gameplay in so much that we need a full-length dev diary to describe it. So for now, we'll just leave it at that. A little bit of a teaser there for some future dev diary. And then here we go. This is like a breakdown of all the different kinds. So, you know, if you're autocratic, they're the 4 types across the 4 pillars of, you know, dynastic, religious, electoral, or tribal. So, you know, you can have a tribal monarchy, or you can have a tribal chiefdom, or tribal theocracy. So again, I mean, there's a lot of options there. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 times 4. You can work that out. They're all the different kinds of government you can have. So quite a lot of those. And then we're going on to laws. This is how you can like, you know, specialize your country, I guess, a little bit. Kind of change how some things work. Of course, there's a lot more defining a country than just its government. We've also broke down many individual aspects into different laws. Each law has a multiple options that affect how a particular mechanic in that country might work. In 1356, most countries have just over 30 laws, each with around 3 options on average. But as the game progresses, you'll unlock more. So there's kind of like that, a small amount at the beginning. Well, not small, it's still 30. And then obviously as you go through 600 years of history, there's going to be way more as you open up, you know, technological changes and stuff like that, I would imagine. The first law we'll look into tenancy. It determines what, if any, rights are afforded to the peasantry. Obviously, this law is only available to countries with a concept of peasantry, which is closely tied to feudalism and the nobility. So you wouldn't have access to this if you were playing a tribal chiefdom in Mongolia, which obviously makes sense because that's not how those realms worked. And yeah, these choices now these look pretty good. If you've ever played Imperial Rome, they had a system kind of like this. I'd be interested to see how this game does it. But yeah, here we go. The tenancy for peasants. So the option they've got here is enserf the peasants. All peasants become serfs, losing their ability to migrate or accumulate savings. So this is where you're basically like you're almost slave labor basically to us. Plus 10 peasantry discontentment. So I imagine you know, you get rebellions once it gets too high maybe, and 30 favors with all nobles. I don't think they've covered how favors work in the game so far, so I presume favors will be, you know, almost like a currency that maybe you can get the nobles to do something. Maybe when you go to war, you need to convince the nobles to send you, you know, give you money and troops under certain governments, or, you know, if you're a autocratic ruler, you could just tell them, you know, give me those troops, I'm off to war. that might be how it works. I'm sure they'll cover it in a later dev diary. And we can always pass this law because we had absolute monarchy. So there you go. Yeah, this is an absolute monarchy, so they could just do whatever they want. Well, they could choose whatever they want. Whether their realm agrees, I'm sure may cause some problems in the future. And here we go. Under serfdom, your country's peasants renamed to serfs have virtually no rights. They cannot migrate, nor can they accumulate savings. Since serfdom is a form of indentured servitude, serfs don't really have wages. Instead, they're just given enough food to survive. And if there isn't enough food for everyone, well, that's their problem. So yeah, people, if you don't have enough food, I guess they just start dying off. You know, bad times, really. They've got these other options as well. We'll talk through this because, like I said, it's pretty interesting. It's just one option. Peasantry is the default tenancy law. Unlike serfs, peasants are afforded some protections from the excesses of the nobility. In theory, they're allowed to migrate, though few are likely to attempt this unless faced by truly extreme circumstances. I wonder if, like, there's a war going on, you'll see people try and escape. Peasants can accumulate wealth, but they can't own land, so buying themselves a peasantry status isn't an option. In contrast to serfs, peasants have at least some access to education, especially if they're provided by the clergy. So again, interesting. It looks like clergy might be able to elevate some of your serfs. You should expect the peasantry to be a beacon of innovation, but they might still be useful in pushing agricultural techs along. Oh, interesting. So yeah, they might just affect certain tech. So if you have a large serf population, maybe that helps you push agricultural techs. Now, looking at that as well, I wonder if that would affect other things as well. You know, maybe if you have, you know, if you're by the sea, maybe you have a large coastal, you know, stretch of land. Maybe it affects like maritime techs or something like that. It might not, but I'm wondering whether it does, because you know, it looks like they've already thought about your realm affecting how tech progress works. By the looks of it anyway. With free tenancy, the peasants, renamed tenants, are given much more opportunity. They're legally protected from high feudal dues and obligations, and if they're successful enough, they might even buy out their landlords. Doing so will make them freeholders, commoners who own the land they work on. To be clear, freeholders aren't a separate social class, they're still commoners, but they just have additional benefits. And the final one is, the final law abolishes tenancy, immediately elevates all peasants to fully fledged commoners. Emancipation of the peasants usually comes with significant consequences, especially for countries that don't go through the intermediate step of free tenancy. That's a topic for another time. So again, there's going to be another dev diary covering how people move up and down the kind of, not social classes, but you know, you'd be going from being like slaves to being free. So I guess that maybe that's what helps the archaic realms happen or something like that. If there's a sudden change, you know, you're a slave and now you're suddenly a free person out of nowhere. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see another dev diary going down the road. For our next law, we'll look at clerical investiture. This is a very hot topic in medieval Europe and other places, the source of numerous conflicts. Definitely was. So this is, as it says here, defer to head of faith. All clergy appointments must be done by the head of faith. So this is where, like, the Pope will say, he's our bishop, and you had no choice. You're just like, okay, he's going to be the bishop of this area. If you have state or local investiture, I think that's where, you know, like the king would say, he's going to be the bishop for my realm, and the Pope didn't like that, but you were the head, so that's what happened. Up to 10 favours with all clergy based on their relationship with their head of faith. I think that's getting favours because you're not interfering with the religious side of things. You're just letting the Pope do whatever they do. And then, yeah, 20 favours with the head of faith. We won't go through all the different options for the faith investiture stuff. I'll put a link to the dev diary in the description if you want to read through them. But similar kind of, like I say, I've given a rough overview of roughly how it will work. Very similar to CK2 or something like that if you played it. The last law we'll look at is slavery laws. It is one of the laws related to slavery, so naturally it requires slavery to be legal in your country. You can't have slave soldiers without slaves. I mean, I wonder if you could steal them. I guess if you didn't have slavery, you wouldn't steal slaves to be in your army, I suppose. Makes sense. Allow slaves to serve in the military and become officers and generals. Again, plus 10 with elites, because obviously they're going to like that. And minus 5 slave discontent. Obviously, slaves aren't going to like that. They're going to be like, cool, I'm a slave. And then you're also going to make me serve in the army. That's a double bad. So, again, slave discontent, I imagine once it gets high enough, you might get slave rebellions and have to deal with all that kind of stuff. The forbidden law is very straightforward. It prevents slaves from serving in the country's military, and then the other ones are different versions of that. And again, they're going to cover that in a future dev diary. These are just 3 of the 30 plus laws we've planned for most countries in 3056. We have laws for pretty much every important country mechanic: succession, pensions, production ownership, state religion, military recruitment, and press freedom. Laws interact with almost every other system in Grey Eminence, so you'll be seeing them quite frequently in future dev diaries. So yeah, we're going to get information about all these other ones. So yeah, we're going to obviously talk about these a little bit more in the future. So that's it for like how the systems work. And then, as I said in the previous ones, they always talk a little bit about modability, which is fantastic. You know, if you make mods or you just like playing mods for games, they always go in at the end of each dev diary about how mods will work in the game and the kind of cool stuff you can do. Again, I'm not a big modder. I play mods, but I don't mod things myself, so I'm not going to talk through this because, you know, it's more technical than I know. But yeah, if you're into that kind of stuff, make sure you read up about it. It's really cool. They go through how a lot of things are going to work, and they do have this nice GIF about how the country editors border brushes in action. So this way you can just basically go in and just simply edit where the borders of any realm is, and you know, he's just painting a bit of the Eastern Roman Empire / Byzantines here by the looks of it. Yeah, I'll just take all that land, Holy Land, yep, North Africa. Let's take it. We own all this now. So there we go. Restoring the glory of the Roman Empire has never been easier. The Ottomans will hate you for discovering this one simple trick. True. That's right. In the world editor, you can simply just paint over the globe. So again, this would be pretty cool for people who like doing crazy playthroughs or, you know, just want to easily change the borders of some things. It looks like literally, because the game is made up of hexes, you can easily just paint over. This is all my realm now. Let's go. So yeah, that's gonna be it for today, guys. Just another pretty good dev diary. As I said before, if you've enjoyed this, hit like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be covering the dev diaries as they come out, like I say, about every 2 weeks. I'll leave a link to the game in Steam as well, so if you do like how Grey Eminence looks, give them a wish list. It really helps studios with how well that game is going to do. So yeah, that's gonna be it for today. I'll see you in the next one.